All right, so to get started adding MongoDB to our backend, the first thing we need to do is actually install the MongoDB driver, right? The npm package that allows our node server to connect to MongoDB into our backend project. So let's open up our backend folder in the terminal. We're going to need to go to cd backend. And inside of there, we're going to need to install the MongoDB driver by saying npm install MongoDB. Okay, and if we hit enter now, that will install that package for us, and we should be able to use that nicely inside our server file. So let's open up server.js now, and we're just going to import the main stuff from the MongoDB driver, and after that, we'll need to actually set up a database for ourselves. So first of all, as you may remember, the main thing that we use from the MongoDB driver package is something called Mongo Client. And this will basically allow us to connect to any running MongoDB instance, whether that's locally, whether that's somewhere in the cloud, etc. All right, it's very similar to what happens if you type in Mongo in your terminal and how that opens a shell, except this allows our backend code to interact with MongoDB instead of ourselves interacting with it through a terminal. All right, and I'm just going to close that terminal for now. We will be coming back there in just a moment here. And the next thing we're going to do, we need to, of course, say from MongoDB. And we're going to need to put all of our routes for now inside an async function because connecting to a MongoDB instance with Mongo Client is asynchronous. And so we're going to need to use the await keyword, which means we're going to need to create a function. We'll call it something like start. And it's going to be an async function. We're going to put all of our routes inside of there. All of the ones that need to use MongoDB, that is, which currently is all of them. And let's just adjust the indentation here. And then up at the top of this start, we're going to connect to MongoDB by saying const client equals await mongo client.connect. And here's where we need to put in the URL of our MongoDB instance. Now, assuming you have MongoDB running locally, you're going to want to say MongoDB :// localhost, and the default port for MongoDB is 27017. Oh, let me try that again. There we go. And then we need to pass a configuration object to Mongo Client Connect that has the properties use new URL parser, true, and use unified topology. True. These are just for compatibility reasons, remember? So anyway, that's how we connect to MongoDB. So the next thing we're going to do is set up a database for our application that will actually store our data. We're just going to insert some fake data in there for now so that we can have something to get started with and actually convert our endpoints over to use MongoDB. All right, so first of all, before I forget to do this and wonder why our app isn't starting up, we need to actually call this start function at the bottom of our file here. And actually we need to put app.listen inside of there as well. There we go. And now we just need to call start at the bottom of the file, which will make sure that all of our routes are added to the app and that our Express server actually starts up and listens on port 8080. All right, so now that we have that, the next thing we're going to do is set up our database. So open up a terminal. It doesn't have to be in backend, but I'm just going to leave it there because that's where I currently am anyway. And you're going to want to type Mongo, and that will open up the Mongo shell where we should be able to interact with a database. Now, if when you run this command you see some kind of error like could not connect or something like that, that probably means you don't have MongoDB running in the background. That happens to me every once in a while, so don't feel too bad about it. In that case, you just need to start up MongoDB locally. Just Google that. Google how to start up MongoDB on and then your operating system, because it is different for different operating systems. So anyway, once you've managed to connect to MongoDB via the shell, what we're going to do is we're going to create a new database. And to do that, we're just going to say use, and then whatever we want to call this database. I'm going to call this notes app DB, and we'll hit enter. And that will set our shell to interact with this specific database. Okay? So now what we're going to do is we're going to insert our first note into our database. And it's going to look an awful lot like this here. So, in fact, we're just going to copy and paste that. You can do that right now if you want to. And to insert it into our database, we're going to say db dot, and then the name of the collection we want to insert this into. So I'm going to say dot notes, and then we're going to say dot insert one. And in between curly braces here, I'm going to paste all of the properties that I just copied. And then we'll close that off and hit enter. And we should see acknowledged true, inserted ID, blah, blah, blah. And that means that everything went well and that that note has now been inserted into our database. All right, so if you want to take a look at it now, you can say db.notes.findOne and just pass empty curly braces there. And that will give us the note that we just inserted, which is currently the only note. And that's the basics of setting up a database for our application. The last thing I'm going to do here is once we have the client inside our start method, I'm just going to say const notesdb equals client.db and then the name of our database, which was notesappdb. Oops, notesappdb, there we go. And we're going to say dot collection, and the collection name that we want is notes. Okay, so that will basically give us a nice quick way to access our notes without having to say db.collection, db.collection, db.collection throughout all of our endpoints here. So I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.